Everybody, comic book review, graphic novel trade, old school. This time we have Why I Hate Saturn by Kyle Baker. Kyle Baker's been around for a while, since at least the say mid late 80s. He's done a lot of freelance work for Marvel and DC. He does a lot of commercial artwork. He's done some stuff in Hollywood and in animation. Most people who know him from mainstream comics, he's probably most known for doing a run on The Shadow for during the late 80s. He did a Plastic Man series, which I haven't read, and he's also did Red, White, and Black, which was the story of the first Black Captain America back in the early 2000s, I think that came out. Um, he's done some indie work too, and some alternative work and stuff like that. This copy you can see here is from Piranha Press, which was a imprint from DC Comics in the late 80s, and it kind of predates the Vertical line. Basically, DC was trying to be a little bit more experimental at that time. This was a time when like alternative comics and indie labels and indie companies, I should say, were starting to get a little bit bigger at that time. You had stuff like Love and Rockets was big from Fantagraphics. You had companies like Slave Labor and Oni Press and stuff like that. And for a while, the whole thing of people doing self-published comics of like slice of life things and autobiographical comics was kind of a big, was kind of a thing at that time. So this was kind of DC trying to do different types of comics that didn't fit into superheroes or science fiction or horror or whatnot. Piranha Press really wasn't that successful. This comic book here was probably the most successful thing they did, and maybe literally one or two other things. So I think they discontinued it in the early 90s and started another imprint which folded right away. And then I think Vertical probably came out in the early 90s, but Vertical was really a very different thing. It really wasn't so much about doing alternative comics as it was about doing, the edgier versions of their superheroes. Now, the premise of Why I Hate Saturn is it's kind of interesting. Basically, it's a comedy about this young lady here, Anne, and her just trying to deal with modern life. It's her, having kind of troubles, dealing with, living in trendy New York. She has relationship problems. She has issues with her job. She wants to be a serious writer, but she writes for this kind of trendy pop culture magazine called Daddy-O, and just kind of the ups and downs of that. And into this situation, her sister Anne moves in, and Anne's problem is she may or may not be in some sort of trouble, but her real problem is she has some sort of mental delusion where she thinks she is queen of the Astro Leather Girls. Wait, let me see if I can find it exactly. She comes to live with her. Oh, yeah. It's a uniform. I am the queen of the Leather Astro Girls of Saturn. So they start living together, and Laura kind of turns Anne's life inside out. But the big joke about it is Laura's a lot more self-confident. She's a happier person. She's actually a really excellent house guest. She cooks, she cleans, she brings healthy food into the house. She's able to get a job right away. She's able to get a date right away. And like I said, the joke is, even though Laura's basically insane, she actually has her life together a lot better than Anne does. At some point, things happen, and Laura's no longer living with Anne, and Anne decides she has to go find her to make sure she's okay. And Anne makes a trip over to the West Coast and has some wacky misadventures there. And that's basically it. A lot of it's not really long on plot. A lot of it's really character interaction and jokes and pontificating again, like I said, about modern life and male-female dynamics and stuff like that. So now basically I liked it. but I did have some major issues with it. First issue is, I think the biggest problem I had with this was the ending, or I should say the climax. It feels totally random and it feels like it came out of nowhere. It's not exactly completely out of nowhere because there were a couple of hints at a couple parts in the story earlier on, but still, what actually happens in the climax just seems so far out of random. Like, it feels like he just pulled it out of his back pocket, like he decided, okay, I've said everything I wanted to say with the actual story and the themes and whatnot, but now I have to end the book. Oh, I don't have an ending. I'll just do this. So I thought that was a major drawback for me. Another thing is a lot of the dialogue is very sitcom-y. People talk in one-liners and zingers and things like that. It's not terrible because a lot of it is funny, or at least I found it amusing. But it calls attention to it calls attention to itself in a lot of places. Like I said, it's people just getting less. It feels less like conversation and more like people quipping and riffing for the sake of quipping and riffing. So yeah. Now, the art I thought was pretty interesting. Kyle Baker draws in his kind of semi-cartoony style, but I think it really works for the material. A lot of the layouts here, though, are pretty different. As you can see here, the captions and the dialogues is out of the, um, it's outside of the panels, and it kind of gives it kind of a comic strippy feel. It also makes it feel a lot like uh, it almost feels like storyboards for a movie in a way. I don't think it hurts the comic. I think it for the most part works, and it helps give it a different feel than your normal superhero comic or even your normal indie underground comic. And and again, it's it's a lot of talky heads, but for the subject matter, I think it works. And you can see there's little kind of gray tones and stuff, but it not being a color doesn't really hurt the material. If I could, one thing I can do sort of wish, I do kind of wish that maybe he did expand on the visuals and the graphics, just really do something interesting as far as design work, because I think, part of what makes comics great is that you can do all sorts of things with visuals and colors and design and whatever, splash pages and spreads and whatnot. And here, a lot of it is just the things he sets up are just really super basic. Oh, another thing I should mention, I guess once upon a time, the whole sort of storyboard feel, I guess once upon a time it actually was optioned for a Hollywood movie. The movie never did get made, but you know. Okay, and another interesting thing is this comic book kind of came out right around that kind of like late 80s, early 90s sort of biff bam pow, comics aren't for kids anymore uh, kind of trend where the media was really taking a look at how, just taking a look at the ideas that, there are adults out there that read comics and whatnot. And it's kind of funny because it's almost, I don't know, maybe I just feel this way because I remember that time, but it's almost like a snapshot of that time because, like I said, even here on the back page summary, they kind of note that comics were kind of getting hip and cool at that particular time. And there are little like pop culture references on the inside. Um, I don't know how well they translate to the 21st century, but like I said, uh, Anne writes for a magazine called Daddy O. It kind of makes me remember there used to be a magazine called Spy that was really big at the time, and it was kind of a pop culture magazine, but it kind of had this kind of pseudo intellectual, self-aware, snarky tone to it. Like We're covering all this stuff, but we're really too smart for it all. I'm not so sure you're really having a equivalent of that these days. Maybe Vice magazine might be that, but there's all this stuff about how the characters hang out in all these trendy places and they go see these trendy things. They go to these kind of fake Mexican restaurants where the whole point of it is it's a fake Mexican restaurant. They hang out at a nightclub called the Crap Bar, where all the trendy people hang out and whatnot. And like I said, I wonder if that really carries over well, from 20 years ago. I don't know, but having said that, I think the other pop culture references, you know, um, they're not as dated, as you might see in some other sources. So I think it would work if you're somebody who's in their mid 20s now reading the comic versus being a mid person in their mid 20s back in the early 90s. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I pretty much enjoyed the comic book. Like I said, I thought it was funny. I thought there were some interesting things they said about dating and relationships. There's some interesting comments about race made in the comic book as well. Um, like I said, the only problem I did have a problem with the ending, and maybe some of the dialogue is just a little bit too cute and too quippy. But for the most part, I enjoyed it, so I would recommend it. If you see it cheap, definitely give it a try. Okay, that's it. I gotta thank you very much, and you have a great day.